Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is zebras still have stripes. No matter how much we hope and pray that they have spots, for instance, the stripes remain. So similarly, although people can change, we shouldn't be disappointed or discouraged or surprised when they show themselves to be the people we know them to be. So it should be an interesting conversation. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. We're talking about zebras still have stripes, and no matter how much we hope and pray for those stripes to turn to spots, they're still stripes. And would a zebra be a zebra if it didn't have stripes? So when I was putting this together or thinking about this title for this morning, it actually prompted me to do a search for spotted zebras just in case. And believe it or not, I actually found clips of a baby zebra that was spotted. And rather than the white background with the black stripes, it was more of a brown color, and it had white spots. Wild, wild, wild. So I don't know if it's still a zebra. If that's the case, I'm just going to put the link to this in the chat because, oh, I don't know if I can do that because it was the result of a search. Let me see if I can put it in the chat. So in other words, anomalies exist, and people can change. Really what we're talking about is the fact that that we shouldn't be surprised when people show up being who we have known them to be. It's not that people don't change, people can change, certainly. And that's probably more the exception than the rule. You know, if there are real fundamental changes in people, maybe hopefully we grow and we evolve and grow beyond certain negative patterns, but that's not a given. It's not a given. And so when people act out the same behaviors that they have historically acted out, it shouldn't be a surprise. And I remember growing up where in an emotionally very unstable environment where I never knew when there was going to be an attack, a reaction. And in fact, as a child, I had some alopecia. Now I have pretty extreme alopecia, but as a child, I guess around adolescence, I developed these bald spots on my head. And at the time, the doctors said that it was common where in places where bombs were being dropped. And that was my experience growing up, where things were volatile. Like I never knew when I would step on a landmine. And I would I'd go through these periods where there was a trust that got cultivated, or I started trusting and feeling safe. And then, bam, there was another landmine. And it just completely derailed that sense of safety and comfort, perhaps. And it's interesting because I've lately witnessed the same behavior, the same pattern, but what's different is that as a child, I was looking externally for definition. I was looking to this very source that was blowing up my world periodically, or my trust, my reliance, whatever, my safety was. As a child, our safety is dependent upon our environment and our caretakers. So it's external. And we're often defined, or pretty much primarily defined, from the externals. And hopefully, as we grow and evolve, we're able to cultivate a sense of self that isn't reliant upon the quixotic nature of our external environment. And what happens too, actually, for so many of us growing up in challenged circumstances, is that we internalize these external inputs and we take them as truth because we're told over and over, you're this, you're that, you're the other thing, you whatever. And we internalize that, and that becomes our reality and our reference point. Hopefully, through growth and evolution, we come to question those identities, those definitions that had been imposed upon us. We come to grow beyond that. Hopefully, we come to find a place of centeredness and create a different reference point for our identity, our identification, our way of being. And so when these disruptive patterns recur externally, we can recognize them as patterns. In other words, we can recognize, oh, the zebra is the zebra is the zebra. And it's not something for me to get upset about. It's not something for me to rail about or to be surprised about or to be derailed by. The zebra's just being the zebra. That's what it does. And we keep, I don't know about you, but I think for a lot of my life, I kept hoping and praying and pretending and that the zebra didn't have, that the stripes of the zebra were fading, so to speak, that there was change happening, and that pattern of trust and betrayal just recurred and recurred and recurred. And the experience of betrayal, and I'm speaking this because I'm thinking that I'm not alone in this dynamic. I'm not the only one who's experienced this kind of behavior in life with people that were formative people in our lives. So the thing is that the hurt and the shock and the experience of betrayal in the past was based on thinking that things should be different, thinking that the zebra should have spots, or that finally the zebras, the stripes are fading, now we're getting spots, and that's better somehow, right? Rather than just saying, hey, a zebra's a zebra, it's not personal. It's not personal to me. It may be that particular zebra and me, but it's not about me, if that makes sense. I think that so much of this defies sense making, but wanting things to be different, we can often get ourselves stuck in a pattern, actually, that perpetuates the very thing we want to be different. So by just allowing things to be as they are without personalizing it, allowing the reaction or the behavior to be over there versus internalizing and creating or receiving the blame is an important distinction. And it's also important that we recognize our own responsibility in these interactions, to be able to look at it from a meta point of view, a stand back point of view, to say, okay, so what's my contribution to this? What do I have to believe in order, or how do I have to behave in order for this kind of interaction to occur? As children, we don't really have that perspective, and we don't really have, I don't think we don't have the same responsibility as children as we do when we grow into adulthood and we can become conscious people, hopefully being engaged with life in a conscious way. So Rosalind says, subject-object relationship. Remove the projection we place on objects, case-by-case basis, rather than applying a global assumption. Yes, exactly. And such a good point. The global assumption is the really challenging part. So when we recognize, it's kind of like the story when someone gets bitten by a dog, then they cultivate a fear, typically, not always, but they typically cultivate a fear of all dogs. Whereas this happened to be one rabid dog, or not rabid, but one aggressive dog, right? And so we tend to generalize. So, for instance, when people experience a cycle of trust and betrayal, the unexamined path is to just assume that that's how it is with everybody, especially if this cycle occurs in an intimate relationship and an intimate and formative relationship. So with that expectation, we can be projecting that expectation into other circumstances where we can actually end up creating those circumstances over and over and over until we recognize, oh my gosh, here's this thing that I've internalized, I've calibrated to, and so I keep regenerating that. This cycle of trust and betrayal, like that's how it is in the world. When where it is in the world is in my projection and in what I attract, for example, until we shift that and look at those foundational wounds and dissolve whatever that pattern is for ourselves on a very deep level. Because what happens is we internalize those patterns, and then energetically, somehow beyond rational thought, at least in my observation, we keep recreating these things. And to your point, Rosalind, if we can recognize that that we're not generalizing, that we needn't make this a global experience. Because what happens is when we have beliefs, when we think we know how things are, those are the things we recognize. And the things that don't align with that, the things that don't align with that definition kind of fall off the radar, or we don't even attract them. And it's kind of like when you go looking to purchase a car and you find a make of car that, or you get a certain car that's a certain make, then you start seeing all those similar makes of cars on the road. And it's why? Because you're tuned in to that car frequency, so to speak. So while the stripes on the zebra stay the same, I'm really working this metaphor not so well, I think, but it was, I'm haunted by the spotted zebra, which is a wonderful thing, that spotted zebras exist. And most likely the zebras that already have their stripes, those stripes aren't going to be turning into something else. And so this also goes to being willing to know what we know, not be surprised when somebody behaves in the way that they behave, or they have behaved in the past. When they do it again, be aware that of course, it shouldn't be, it's not personal. And I think actually so much of our interactions with the world, we personalize, we make about us, when in fact it's about the other person. So for instance, maybe I meet somebody who has had bad experiences with someone who's bald, and from the very minute they meet me, they don't like me. This hasn't occurred, at least to my knowledge, but they don't like me because I remind them of this other person. They may not even realize that I remind them of this other person, but they just have this reaction to me. And while their reaction to me may be because of something about me, it's the reaction that they're having isn't personal, because it's not, they don't even know me, right? They're having this response to me without even really knowing me. So that's what I mean by it's not personal. It may be directed to us personally, but it's not personal. It's really a projection of what that is going on with that other person. And when we can recognize that we have the ability to transcend our stories, to transcend our history, there's a tremendous freedom available. I was scrolling through TikTok, and I saw something that was somebody talking about personal history and a lesson that they had learned from Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda, wonderful books, Separate Reality, A Yaqui Way of Knowledge, wonderful, wonderful books. I read them when I was a teenager. And he was talking about how when he let go of his personal history, all of a sudden life became a different experience. And what it means to let go of our personal history is to not be clinging to all the definitions that we have about all these interactions, right? So the experience that I had growing up is that it was my fault. I was terrible. And I caused all kinds of pain and all these stories. And growing up and learning so much about about being responsible for our own experience, etc., what I recognize is the patterns of projection that were put on me, even when the behaviors from me were completely misaligned with the experience on the other side. Like we get so committed to how we see things that we're going to project it even into a situation where it doesn't fit. And it kind of, it defies the ability to make sense of it. It's kind of like somebody's on this fast train somewhere and you're standing on the track. You're going to get run over, and it's not personal. You're on the track. You're just going to get run over because you're there. And I think that the bottom line of this is multifold here. One is we're all acting out of our own projections, and we can add to the story in ways that serve us or don't serve us. So when somebody's just being how they're being, we can make up all kinds of stories about it. We can create an attack around it. We can beat the zebra up for having stripes. We can rail against the unfairness of the stripes, or we can just recognize the zebra has stripes. It's not an affront to me personally. It's just the zebra being the zebra. That's one thing that we can do in freeing ourselves from the dynamics of our story, you know, because in the story, it really was perhaps made personal. It's your fault. How many of us have received blame from others for situations that wasn't, you know, when somebody is feeling unhappy, we might have said something and then they responded in the way that they responded. Maybe we could have said things differently, So there's two parts, and they're not the same. We conflate these two things all the time. I guess that's why I'm having trouble articulating it, but we conflate these two things where there's the behavior and there's the reaction. And we are accountable for the behavior, which might not have been great. And the reaction is, when we have a reaction, we're accountable for that. And there are 2 points of intervention. One is for being accountable for the behavior that triggered somebody in some way, being accountable for that behavior. And the other is that reactivity, being accountable for whoever's reactive, being accountable for themselves. So when we take on that responsibility, that level of responsibility, there's a new possibility for how we can interact with each other rather than blaming and shaming. So I hope you can make some sense out of all of that. Obviously, I'm still trying to navigate through ways to articulate these very bizarre dynamics that can occur. But that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it is a deep pleasure and privilege to be muddling through these musings. Rosalind says, thank you for sharing what's on your mind and in your heart. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you for being here and being engaged, and just so much appreciation. So